Welcome to our deep dive into speaking English faster. We're going to really dissect this guide that you've provided, which is jam-packed with tips and tricks.
Oh, yeah.
And hopefully by the end of this deep dive, you'll be well on your way to speaking English more confidently and more quickly.
Yeah, it's really interesting how this guide kicks off. It almost feels like a pep talk, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's like they're emphasizing that speaking English is a skill, not like some innate talent.
Yeah, it really does. It's like
Yeah.
they're trying to break down any mental barriers right from the very beginning. It reminds me of this whole concept of like a growth mindset, which essentially means, believing that your abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work.
Exactly. And that applies so perfectly to language learning. The guide even suggests that you don't need years to achieve fluency,
Right.
which I think is such an encouraging message. I'm kind of curious, though, what are your thoughts on that? I mean,
I'd be stunned.
is it truly possible to become fluent in a relatively short amount of time?
That's a great question. I think it depends on your definition of fluency and like the amount of effort that you're willing to put in.
Yeah.
But I do think the guide makes a very valid point. The right approach can definitely accelerate your progress. What I thought was really fascinating is how the guide tackles the fear of making mistakes. It almost encourages you to embrace them.
Oh, I found that interesting too. Well, from a cognitive science perspective, mistakes are actually crucial for learning.
Right.
When you make a mistake, your brain is basically recalibrating, creating stronger neural pathways. It's a phenomenon called neuroplasticity, which refers to your brain's ability to change and adapt
Throughout life.
throughout life. Yeah,
So it's like our brains are constantly rewiring themselves based on our experiences.
precisely. And when it comes to language learning, each mistake is an opportunity for your brain to refine its understanding of the language.
Gotcha.
The guide even mentions something called myelination, which is basically the process of forming like a fatty sheath around nerve fibers, making them more efficient at transmitting signals.
Oh.
And guess what strengthens that myelin? Practice, even when it involves making mistakes.
So the more we practice, the more insulated those neural pathways become, allowing us to process and produce language more quickly and accurately.
Exactly. It's like creating a superhighway for English in your brain.
Nice. Love that. Now let's move on to some practical tips. The guide suggests starting with simple sentences, even using your morning routine as an example. It's such a
Yeah.
relatable concept.
Oh, that's a brilliant strategy because it connects language learning to your everyday life.
Right.
By describing your morning routine in English, you're essentially practicing vocabulary and sentence structure in a context that's already familiar to you. And those small, consistent steps, like building blocks, they create a strong foundation for fluency.
Here's where the guide takes a really interesting thinking in English. They are pretty adamant about stopping translation in your head and starting to think directly in English.
This is where we really delve into the heart of language acquisition.
Okay.
Imagine this. When you translate, you're basically using your native language as a middleman, right? Which slows down the process.
Right.
But when you think directly in English, you're rewiring your brain to process the language more naturally and efficiently.
So they even have some fun, albeit slightly quirky techniques for this.
Huh?
They recommend things like naming objects around you in English all day.
Yes. That constant low-level exposure can be surprisingly effective.
Or even having conversations with yourself in English.
Oh, yeah.
Which I will admit, I've tried, and it can feel a little strange at first.
It might seem odd.
Yeah.
But remember, you're creating an immersive environment for your brain, even if it's just you and your English-speaking inner voice.
It's like having a built-in language partner, always available for a chat. All right, now the guide moves on to more structured practice methods, starting with watching movies and shows with subtitles, specifically mentioning this shadowing technique.
Ah, shadowing. This technique is all about mimicking native speakers.
Oh.
As you shadow, pay close attention to their pronunciation, their rhythm, their intonation. It's like you're training your voice to follow the contours of natural English speech.
It almost feels like you're syncing up with the actors, trying to match their every inflection.
Right.
And speaking of rhythm, the guide also recommends singing along to English songs.
Oh, yeah.
They even suggest starting with simpler songs like Let It Be.
Music is an incredibly powerful tool for language learning
Right.
because it engages multiple areas of the brain simultaneously. Think about it. You're learning new vocabulary, you're internalizing grammatical structures, and you're absorbing the natural rhythm and intonation of the language.
All at once.
All at once.
All while enjoying like a catchy tune.
Exactly.
All right, now let's get physical. The guide actually emphasizes the importance of training your mouth muscles for clearer pronunciation.
This often gets overlooked,
Right.
But clear pronunciation relies on specific muscle movements, just like any other physical skill. And the guide provides some excellent exercises, repeating sequences like la la la, ta ta ta, and ra ra ra.
Those remind me of those tongue twisters we used to practice as kids.
Exactly. They serve a similar purpose. Training those fine motor skills involved in articulation.
Okay.
And these are actually techniques used in speech therapy to improve clarity and fluency.
So we're essentially giving our mouths a workout, making those muscles stronger and more adept at producing English sounds.
Precisely. And the more you practice these exercises, the more effortless and natural your pronunciation will become.
All right, now the guide shifts gears and dives into the concept of immersion, encouraging you to surround yourself with English as much as possible.
Yeah.
They suggest things like changing your phone settings to English, labeling objects in your home, listening to English podcasts, even just talking to yourself in English.
This goes back to the idea of language acquisition, which really emphasizes the importance of consistent exposure to the language.
Right.
Think about how children learn their native language. They're constantly immersed in it, hearing it spoken around them, interacting with others, and gradually absorbing its nuances. By creating an immersive environment, even in your own home, you're essentially replicating that natural language learning process.
And the guide encourages you to start speaking NW, even if it's just with simple sentences.
Yes.
Progress over perfection. Right.
Absolutely. Don't let the fear of making mistakes hold you back.
Right.
Every time you speak, you're reinforcing those neural pathways. You're building confidence, and you're moving closer to fluency. It's all about taking those small, consistent steps, and before you know it, you'll be amazed at how far you've come.
Right.
I'm actually kind of curious. What stands out to you so far in this guide? What are some of the things that really resonate with you?
What's really resonating with me is the emphasis on mindset and how it can impact your learning journey. This whole idea that anyone can become fluent with the right approach and a willingness to embrace challenges. It's truly inspiring.
I completely agree. And this actually sets the stage for the next level techniques, which we can dive into after a quick break.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
So we've covered some of the foundational aspects of language learning: mindset, embracing mistakes, and building those neural pathways.
Yeah.
Now let's explore some of the guide's more like advanced techniques.
Oh yeah. These next level strategies are all about refining the skills you've been developing and taking your fluency to the next level.
Okay.
One fascinating concept the guide highlights is intonation, which they describe as the music of language.
Oh, I love that analogy. It makes sense though, right?
Yeah.
Intonation is all about the rise and fall of your voice, the subtle changes in pitch that convey meaning and emotion.
Exactly.
It's what makes spoken English sound so natural and engaging.
Think about how a simple phrase like, "How's it going?" can take on completely different meanings depending on your intonation.
Right.
You could say it with genuine curiosity, excitement, or even sarcasm,
Yeah.
all by adjusting the way your voice rises and falls.
It's like those hidden layers of communication that go beyond the words themselves.
Yeah.
The guide even mentions that listening to audiobooks or podcasts can be a great way to tune your ear to these subtle nuances of intonation.
Absolutely. It's like immersing yourself in the natural flow of spoken English.
Another intriguing concept the guide explores is the idea of thinking in phrases rather than individual words.
Oh, yeah.
I've heard about this. It's about training your brain to process language in chunks like, "How's it going?" or "See you later," instead of focusing on each word in isolation.
Precisely. Native speakers don't think about each word individually. They think in these prefabricated chunks of language that flow together smoothly. By mastering these common phrases, you can reduce the cognitive load and speak more spontaneously without having to pause and translate in your head.
It's almost like having these ready-made building blocks of language that you can quickly assemble in conversation.
That's a great way to put it.
Now let's talk about the power of questions, which the guide emphasizes as a key driver of conversation.
Yeah.
I've always found that asking questions, even simple ones, is a great way to keep a conversation flowing. It shows that you're engaged and interested in what the other person has to say.
Exactly. And from a psychological perspective, asking questions encourages active listening and deeper connection.
Right.
It shifts the focus from yourself to the other person, inviting them to share their thoughts and experiences.
The guide recommends practicing both asking and answering questions, even if it's just in front of a mirror.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a brilliant idea.
Okay.
It might feel a little silly at first, but by watching yourself in the mirror, you become more aware of your facial expressions, your body language, and how you're coming across.
Yeah.
It's like getting instant feedback on your communication style.
I agree. The guide even suggests smiling while you practice,
Oh.
which can actually make your voice sound more friendly and approachable.
I never thought about that, but it makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
A smile conveys warmth and openness, even in your voice.
Exactly.
The guide also touches on the importance of community and finding language partners for real-life conversation practice.
This is where the rubber meets the road.
Right,
There's no substitute for interacting with other English speakers in real time.
right.
It pushes you out of your comfort zone, exposes you to different accents and speaking styles, and helps you develop those spontaneous communication skills that are essential for fluency.
And thankfully, there are so many resources available these days, from online language exchange platforms to local conversation groups.
Oh, absolutely.
The guide even encourages reaching out to friends, family members, or colleagues who speak English. Sometimes those informal interactions can be the most beneficial because
Yeah.
they feel less pressured and more natural.
And here's a piece of advice that I found particularly intriguing.
Okay.
The guide suggests that teaching someone else can actually solidify your own understanding.
Oh, that's fascinating. I heard of this concept before. It's
Yeah.
like when you have to explain something to someone else, you're forced to organize your thoughts, clarify your understanding, and articulate the information in a clear and concise way.
Precisely. And in the process of teaching, you often uncover gaps in your own knowledge, which motivates you to learn even more.
Yeah.
It's a win-win situation.
Yeah.
You know, you're helping someone else while simultaneously deepening your own understanding of the language.
I love that. So it's not just about absorbing information, it's about actively engaging with it, processing it, and making it your own.
Exactly.
The guide also stresses the importance of consistent practice, making English a part of your daily life.
Yes. Even short bursts of focused practice, 10, 15 minutes a day, can make a significant difference over time. It's all about building that habit, that consistent exposure to the language.
They suggest incorporating English into your daily routine, like talking to yourself in English while you're getting ready in the morning,
Yeah.
watching a short English language video during your lunch break, or listening to an English podcast while you're commuting.
Those are great ideas.
Right.
It's about finding those little pockets of time throughout the day where you can sprinkle in some English practice.
Right.
And it doesn't have to feel like a chore.
Yeah.
You can choose activities that you genuinely enjoy, like watching a favorite TV show with English subtitles or listening to music by English-speaking artists.
This reminds me of a time when I was trying to improve my Spanish.
Oh, yeah.
I started listening to Spanish music while I was cooking dinner,
Yeah.
and it was amazing how much vocabulary I picked up without even realizing it.
Right.
It became like a fun little ritual that I looked forward to.
That's a perfect example of how you can seamlessly integrate language learning into your daily life.
Yeah.
And as you start experiencing those small wins, your confidence grows and you're more likely to stick with it. It's like creating a positive feedback loop that fuels your motivation and progress.
I love that idea of a positive feedback loop.
Yep.
It's like a snowball effect.
Yeah.
Where those small, consistent actions build upon each other,
Right.
leading to significant results over time.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of language learning.
Yeah.
It's a journey of continuous growth and discovery.
So as we transition into the final part of this deep dive,
Yeah.
let's explore how the guide encourages you to maintain that momentum and stay inspired on your path to fluency. So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
Oh, yeah.
From like those initial mindset shifts to practical techniques and even like the science behind how our brains learn language.
It's been quite a journey.
Yeah.
And as we kind of approach the final stretch of this guide, what really stands out to me is this emphasis on motivation.
Right.
And keeping that spark alive.
Right. It's not just about learning the mechanics of the language, but also about cultivating the passion and the perseverance to stay committed to this whole journey.
And the guide does this beautifully by reminding you to connect back to your why.
Right.
You know, that initial spark that ignited your desire to learn English.
Yeah, whether it's to connect with people from different cultures, travel the world with confidence, or pursue new career opportunities, having that clear sense of purpose
Yeah.
can really fuel your motivation,
Oh, absolutely.
especially when things get challenging.
And speaking of challenges, the guide does acknowledge that there will be times when you feel frustrated or discouraged.
Oh, for sure.
It's inevitable in any learning process,
It's part of the process.
but it's how you respond to those challenges that truly matters, you know?
Right.
The guide encourages you to view setbacks as opportunities for growth, moments to reflect, adjust your approach, and come back even stronger.
It's like that famous quote,
Oh, yeah. What is it?
"Our greatest glory is not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall."
I love that.
And that resilience, that ability to bounce back from setbacks, is crucial for success in language learning.
And remember, fluency isn't a destination, it's a journey.
Right.
There's no finish line.
It's about continuous growth and improvement, always striving to refine your skills and expand your knowledge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the guide reminds you to celebrate those small wins along the way.
Yeah.
You know, each new word you learn, each conversation you have,
Yeah.
each time you express yourself more clearly, those are all victories worth celebrating.
Yeah, those small victories build momentum and reinforce your belief in yourself. They remind you that you're making progress even when it doesn't feel like it.
And as you accumulate those small wins, you start to see the bigger picture unfolding.
Yeah.
You begin to understand that fluency is not some distant, unattainable goal,
Right.
but rather a series of achievable steps taken one day at a time.
And I love that perspective. Yeah.
It shifts the focus from overwhelm to empowerment. You start to believe, hey, I can actually do this.
And that belief in yourself, that self-efficacy, is essential for staying motivated
Right.
and pushing through those inevitable plateaus and challenges that arise along the way.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the guide leaves us with a really powerful message.
That's that.
It's not about being perfect. It's about progress. It's not about speaking flawlessly from day one, but about embracing the journey and enjoying the process of learning and growing.
Beautifully said. And as the guide so eloquently puts it, the world is waiting for your voice. Speak up and own it.
What an inspiring message. So to our listener, we encourage you to embrace that message, take action, and let your voice be heard.
Yeah, keep learning, keep speaking, and keep believing in yourself.
We have no doubt that you have the potential to achieve fluency in English and unlock a world of opportunities.